The MMA community has been reacting intensely to Demetrious Johnson after he shared a strong opinion regarding Islam Makhachev's future. Johnson weighed in on the conversation following UFC 322 and expressed a perspective that many fans did not expect. According to the legendary former champion, Makhachev should not continue chasing legacy across divisions indefinitely. Instead, Johnson believes that the most meaningful next step would be a super fight with Ilia Topuria, and after that, Makhachev should retire from the sport. Johnson explained that he has seen Islam in person and trained with him, fully aware of his physical presence and capabilities. He rejected the idea that Makhachev is undersized at welterweight and made it clear that he is much bigger than many fans think. Johnson questioned who Islam would even fight next at 170 that could elevate his legacy in a significant way. In his view, Islam should take on Topuria in what would be one of the biggest events in UFC history, ideally positioned at the White House, and if he wins, he should hang up the gloves permanently. He argued that Makhachev has already earned financial security and that going out on top, much like Khabib Nurmagomedov did, would be the most honorable exit possible. Johnson criticized the tendency of fighters to stay in the sport for too long despite repeated physical damage, and he insisted that Makhachev has nothing left to prove if he wins such a monumental matchup. However, not everyone in the MMA community supported Johnson's argument. Many fans strongly disagreed with the idea of Makhachev fighting a featherweight next when there are elite welterweight contenders waiting for a title shot. A major criticism was that asking Islam to risk his status by fighting a smaller opponent would not make competitive sense and would feel more like spectacle than sport. Fans pointed to top welterweights such as Morales, Prates, Usman, Ian Gary, Bilal Muhammad, and Shavkat Rakhmonov as the rightful contenders. Some argued that Makhachev's legacy should be built by fighting the most dangerous challengers available, not the most marketable. Others responded that a Topuria fight would generate historic financial value and cement Makhachev as one of the greatest athletes of all time. Meanwhile, critics insisted that Khabib retired due to personal tragedy, not an artificial legacy plan, and Islam's career should not be forced into a similar narrative. A loss to Topuria would damage his reputation, and victory would arguably add little to it. The divide in the community reflects a larger debate about legacy, business, and merit in modern MMA. Robert Whittaker shared his thoughts on Islam Makhachev's most recent performance and the future possibilities surrounding his career. Whittaker spoke with clear respect for what Makhachev has achieved already, highlighting not only the dominance he has shown across two weight divisions but also the level of technical growth that continues to be evident every time he steps into the cage. According to Whittaker, it is entirely realistic to imagine Islam pursuing a historic third division challenge in the middleweight division. Whittaker emphasized that Makhachev has the physical frame that could allow him to compete with some of the elite athletes in the middleweight class. He pointed out that Makhachev has proven he can handle bigger, stronger opponents and that if his body adapts correctly, the transition to middleweight could be successful. From Whittaker's perspective, the key factor is not only size but also style. He believes Makhachev's powerful wrestling, intelligent pressure, and disciplined striking could present serious problems for many top-tier middleweights. He went on to explain that if the UFC ever decided to stage such a fight on a major international card, particularly in a location like Abu Dhabi, it would be one of the biggest events the company has ever produced. Whittaker expressed that the combination of star power, history-making potential, and global fan interest would create an atmosphere unlike anything previously seen. In his view, it would be the kind of event where every fighter, every fan, and every stakeholder walked away winning. Whittaker did acknowledge that middleweight competition is filled with extremely dangerous fighters, and moving up in weight always introduces new challenges, but he did not doubt Makhachev's competitiveness or his ability to adjust. He highlighted how fighters who achieve greatness are often driven by new goals and tougher mountains to climb, and he believes Makhachev fits into that category. To Whittaker, the idea of Makhachev pursuing a third division title is more than a headline. It represents a moment that could redefine the sport and stretch the boundaries of what fighters believe is possible. Whittaker concluded by stating that if the UFC decides to go forward with that kind of matchup, the sport would witness something historic, and fans across the world would rush to see how far a champion like Islam Makhachev can push the limits of his legacy. Islam Makhachev spoke about his next potential opponent immediately after UFC 322 while sitting down with Laura Sanko and Paul Felder. When asked who he wanted to face next, Makhachev gave a clear and detailed explanation of why he believes Kamaru Usman is the right fight for him. He acknowledged that other welterweights, including fighters like Morales and Prates, performed extremely well on the same card, and he respects their skills and progress in the division. However, in Islam's view, Kamaru Usman presents the most meaningful and challenging matchup from both a competitive and legacy standpoint. Makhachev stated that although younger and hungry contenders are rising quickly in the division, Usman remains one of the most dangerous athletes in the entire sport. He described Usman as the biggest threat and someone who still holds elite experience, physical strength, and championship-level mentality. Makhachev emphasized that if the UFC were to offer him a choice and ask who he wants next, he would select Kamaru Usman without hesitation. He made it clear that this preference is based not on convenience but on respect for what Usman has accomplished and the difficulty of the challenge. Islam also highlighted that it is not his job to pick opponents and that he will be prepared for anyone the promotion selects. He insisted that he is willing to take on any contender at welterweight and that the belt will remain in safe hands regardless of who stands across from him. Still, it is impossible to ignore the deeper significance behind his words. Challenging Usman would represent an opportunity to add another all-time great to his resume, and beating a former dominant welterweight champion would elevate his legacy into an even more historic category. From a promotional standpoint, it is easy to understand why Islam wants this matchup. Usman is considered one of the greatest welterweights in UFC history and set a standard for dominance during his title reign. A fight between Makhachev and Usman would not only attract massive global attention but would also answer major questions about how Makhachev performs against an experienced legend rather than a rising contender. The decision now lies with the UFC. Fans are waiting to see whether the promotion wants to take the Usman route or move forward with younger challengers already climbing the rankings. Makhachev has stated his preference, and now the MMA world is watching to see what comes next. Many fans and analysts questioned how Islam Makhachev would physically look in his welterweight debut. Some had long argued that he was naturally too big for lightweight and that 170 was where he truly belonged, while others believed he might be undersized against natural welterweights. Once he stepped into the cage against Jack Della Maddalena, the discussion changed instantly. Makhachev did not look smaller or weaker in comparison. In fact, he appeared bigger, stronger, and more explosive than ever. He took Della Maddalena down effortlessly, controlled him with overwhelming pressure, and displayed the type of wrestling strength that Jack had not experienced even against full-sized welterweights. Fighters who had previously stuffed takedown attempts from natural welterweights could not stop Makhachev's technique, timing, and physical power. The performance intensified the ongoing debate surrounding his years at lightweight and whether he had been too big for that division. This was a narrative Joe Rogan had publicly supported on his podcast, stating that Makhachev was never truly a 155-pound fighter and that his extreme weight cuts were unnecessary and outdated. Rogan expressed disbelief at Makhachev ever making the lightweight limit, claiming he looked close to 190 pounds in person and describing the whole system of weight cutting as outdated. Rogan even mentioned that he had discussed weight class restructuring with Dana White and Ari Emanuel. After becoming welterweight champion, Makhachev was asked directly about Rogan's old comments and responded with clarity and confidence. He explained that the accusations did not make sense because every true lightweight must walk around considerably heavier than the actual fight weight. He stated that most fighters who compete at 155 weigh at least 177 to 178 pounds in everyday life. Makhachev went on to explain that his body weight throughout his lightweight career was stable and natural, not the result of extreme dieting or unhealthy cutting. He avoided eating late at night, stayed away from sugar, and had not consumed soda for years. Throughout his run at 155, his maximum walking weight was around 182 pounds, and even without dieting, he consistently walked around 180. He stressed that he never had to torture his body or follow extreme programs to make weight and that his approach to nutrition was sustainable and healthy. For him, the lightweight division was where he naturally belonged at the time. His transition to welterweight came from athletic growth and career progression, not from running away from a difficult weight cut. Makhachev made it clear that he hears the criticism but chooses to answer it through competition. His message was simple. His success across 2 divisions is a product of skill, discipline, and preparation, not weight manipulation. Magomed Chanko Zainikov has finally broken his silence regarding the explosive brawl with Dylan Donies at UFC 322 inside Madison Square Garden. In his first full explanation, Zainikov stated that his actions were not impulsive or emotional but rooted in the belief that Donies needed to be held accountable for his behavior. He made it clear that Donies had crossed multiple lines with his words and actions, and according to Zainikov, certain insults cannot be ignored or forgiven. He emphasized that people must take responsibility for what they say, both inside and outside the cage, and that respect has to remain a core principle in combat sports. The aftermath of the brawl was dramatic. Dylan Donies was immediately handed a permanent ban from attending UFC events. At the same time, Chanko and other members of Islam Makhachev's team who were involved in the altercation were escorted out of the arena by security. They were not allowed to return for the remainder of the event and ended up watching the rest of UFC 322 from their hotel rooms instead of from cageside. The entire situation spread rapidly across the MMA world within minutes. Videos circulated across social media, fans reacted in real time, and Chanko Zainikov unexpectedly became one of the most talked about names of the weekend. The incident also turned Zainikov into an online sensation. Fans began creating memes, edits, and highlight montages dedicated to him, and his personality suddenly became a topic of widespread fascination. What could have been a damaging moment for his reputation instead created momentum, elevating his popularity among a large segment of the MMA audience. People admired his unapologetic stance and his loyalty to his team, and many began calling for the UFC to give him a chance to compete inside the octagon. That wish has now become reality. Chanko Zainikov has officially been signed by Dana White, and anticipation for his debut is building quickly. Fans want to see whether the intensity he displayed outside the cage can translate into dominance inside it. His upcoming first appearance in the UFC is already one of the most discussed subjects among fight enthusiasts, and many supporters are predicting that he could develop into one of the newest breakout stars in the promotion. While critics argue that the brawl is what pushed him into the spotlight, supporters believe his fighting style and mindset will justify his presence in the organization. Regardless of opinion, one thing is certain. Chanko Zainikov is entering the UFC with more attention than most debuting fighters ever receive. And all eyes will be on him when he finally steps into the cage.